The lotus is one of the most beautiful flowers in the world, but what makes it truly special is not just its appearance, it is the way it grows. A lotus begins its life in the mud, deep under the water. The water is not always clean. It can be dark and filled with dirt. Yet the lotus rises from this environment, slowly reaching toward the surface. When it finally blooms, it remains untouched by the mud. This journey of the lotus is a powerful lesson for us. Our lives, too, are often filled with struggles. We face difficulties, sadness, and uncertainty. Sometimes we may feel trapped, as if we are stuck in the mud of our own problems. But the lotus teaches us that growth is always possible, no matter where we start. Like the flower, we can rise above our challenges. We do not have to be defined by our past or by difficult circumstances. The lotus also reminds us that growth takes time. It does not bloom overnight. It slowly pushes through the water, facing resistance along the way. If the lotus stopped growing because it was difficult, it would never see the sunlight. But it continues, and when it reaches the surface, it opens its petals wide, showing its beauty to the world. In the same way, our own growth is a process. We may not always see progress right away. Some days feel harder than others. But if we keep moving forward, step by step, we will eventually bloom in our own way. Even when life is difficult, we have the potential to transform. The most inspiring part of the lotus is that, despite growing in muddy water, it remains pure. The dirt does not stain its petals. This reminds us that we do not have to be controlled by the negativity around us. No matter what difficulties we face, we can stay true to ourselves. Growth is not always easy. But when we look at the lotus, we see that beauty can come from even the most challenging conditions. We all have the ability to rise, to grow, and to bloom. Like the lotus, we can reach toward the light, no matter where we begin. The journey of the lotus is one of transformation. It begins in the darkness, hidden beneath the water. At first, it cannot see the light. It only knows the mud and the struggle of moving upward. Yet it does not stop. Slowly, it rises, reaching for something it cannot yet see. Eventually, it breaks through the surface, where the sun welcomes it. It opens its petals, fully embracing the light. This journey is much like our own. In life, we all experience darkness. Sometimes it comes in the form of hardship, a loss, a failure, or an unexpected challenge. Other times, it is uncertainty, when we do not know what lies ahead. In these moments, it can feel as if the light is far away, or even unreachable. But just like the lotus, we are not meant to stay in the darkness. We are meant to rise. Many people believe that struggle is something to avoid. They fear difficulties and try to escape from them. But the lotus shows us that struggle is not a sign of failure. It is part of the process of growth. Without the journey through the water, the lotus would never bloom. In the same way, our challenges help us grow. They shape us, making us stronger and wiser. What gives the lotus its strength is its trust in the process. It does not rush. It does not resist. It simply continues to rise. We too can learn from this. When we face dark moments, we do not need to be afraid. Instead, we can trust that, even if we do not see the light yet, it is there. If we keep moving forward, we will eventually find it. The lotus does not bloom for itself alone. It opens in the sunlight, bringing beauty to the world around it. In the same way, when we rise from our struggles, we do not just help ourselves. We become a source of inspiration for others. Our journey through darkness allows us to share light with those who may still be struggling. Life is not always easy, But when we feel lost in the dark, we can remember the lotus. Even when it cannot see the light, it keeps growing. And one day, it blooms. So can we. The lotus does not grow in clear, still water. It takes root in the mud, where the conditions are not always easy. The water around it may be murky, filled with obstacles. The currents may push against it. Yet despite these challenges, the lotus does not give up. It keeps growing, moving steadily toward the surface. When it finally blooms, it stands above the water, untouched by the struggles it has overcome. In life, we also face adversity. Sometimes, it feels like we are surrounded by difficulties, like the lotus in the muddy water. We may face criticism, disappointment, or unexpected hardships. The world around us is not always kind or supportive, but the lotus teaches us that we do not have to be controlled by our circumstances. Even in the most difficult conditions, we have the power to grow. True strength is not about avoiding hardship. It is about facing challenges with patience and resilience. The lotus does not resist the water or fight against the mud. Instead, it uses them as part of its journey. The difficulties it faces do not stop its growth. They make it stronger. In the same way, when we experience struggles, we can choose how to respond. We can let them define us, or we can use them as lessons to help us rise. The lotus also shows us that strength does not have to be aggressive. It does not force its way to the surface. It grows naturally, steadily, without rushing. Sometimes, in difficult moments, we may feel the need to fight back or resist what is happening. But true strength comes from knowing when to keep going, when to be patient, and when to trust that we will reach the surface in time. What makes the lotus so inspiring is that, despite all it has been through, it does not carry the mud with it. When it blooms, its petals remain pure and clean. In the same way, we do not have to hold on to the pain of our past. We can acknowledge our struggles without letting them define who we are. Adversity is part of life, but it does not have to stop us from growing. Like the lotus, we can rise above challenges, not by fighting against them, but by continuing forward. Even in the hardest moments, we have the strength to bloom. The lotus flower is often admired for its beauty, but what makes it truly remarkable is its purity. It rises from the mud and blooms in the sunlight, yet its petals remain untouched by the dirt below. No matter how unclean the water may be, the lotus stays pure. It does not absorb the mud. It does not carry it with it. Instead, it simply blossoms, clean and radiant. This is a powerful lesson for us. In life, we are surrounded by many things, some positive, some negative. We experience difficulties, face negativity, and sometimes find ourselves in environments that do not support our well-being. People may criticize us. The world may test us. Yet, like the lotus, we do not have to let these things define us. No matter what happens around us, we can keep our inner selves pure. Purity does not mean being perfect. It does not mean avoiding all difficulties or never making mistakes. The lotus does not bloom in a perfect place. It grows in the mud. In the same way, our lives are not always easy, and we are not free from imperfections. But true purity comes from within. It is about staying true to who we are, no matter what challenges we face. The lotus reminds us that we do not have to carry the weight of negativity. Just as it does not let the mud stick to its petals, we do not have to hold on to anger, fear, or regret. If we allow these things to stay in our hearts, they will cloud our spirit, just as muddy water can cloud a pond. But if we learn to let go, we remain light, free, and open to growth. Sometimes we may feel affected by the world around us. But the lotus teaches us that we have a choice. We can choose how we respond to negativity. We can choose whether to hold on to pain or to rise above it. And just like the lotus, we can bloom with purity, no matter where we come from. True beauty is not just about appearance, it is about how we live. The lotus shows us that purity is not about escaping difficulties, but about staying true to ourselves in any situation. No matter what surrounds us, we can remain unshaken. We can rise from the mud, bloom fully, and share our light with the world. The lotus flower does not rush to bloom. It does not struggle or force itself upward. Instead, it moves with the natural rhythm of life. It slowly rises from the water, patiently reaching toward the surface. And when it finally blooms, it remains still, floating peacefully. It does not chase after the wind or fight against the currents. It simply exists in its own beauty, undisturbed by the world around it. In our lives, we often feel pressure to move quickly. Society tells us to always be productive, to achieve more, to do things faster. We rush from one task to the next, constantly searching for something better. But in this rush, we sometimes forget the power of stillness. The lotus reminds us that true beauty is not found in constant movement, but in being fully present. Stillness does not mean doing nothing. It does not mean avoiding responsibilities. Rather, it means being at peace with where we are in this moment. The lotus does not rush to bloom before it is ready. It grows at its own pace, trusting that when the time is right, it will open naturally. In the same way, we do not need to force our growth. We do not need to compare our progress to others. We can trust that our journey is unfolding as it should. When the lotus blooms, it does so with ease. It does not resist the water or try to control its surroundings. This teaches us another lesson. Peace comes not from controlling everything around us, but from accepting things as they are. Many of our struggles come from trying to change things we cannot change. But when we learn to let go of this need for control, we find a deeper sense of peace. The lotus also reminds us that stillness allows us to see clearly. When water is disturbed, it becomes cloudy, making it difficult to see what is beneath the surface. But when the water is calm, everything becomes clear. Our minds work the same way. When we are constantly busy, filled with distractions, it is hard to understand ourselves. But in stillness, we can see who we truly are. Like the lotus, we can learn to embrace stillness. We do not have to rush. We do not have to fight against the current. We can simply be. And in that stillness, we will find beauty, clarity, and a deep sense of peace. The lotus is not just a flower. It is a reflection of life itself. Its journey from the mud to full bloom mirrors the journey we all take. Each of us faces struggles, moments of uncertainty, and times when we feel stuck. But just like the lotus, we have the ability to rise, to grow, and to bloom. In life, we all start from different places. Some of us are born into challenges, while others face hardships later on. But where we begin does not determine where we end up. The lotus begins in the mud, but it does not stay there. It moves upward, seeking the light. In the same way, no matter where we are in life, we have the potential to move forward. Our past does not define us. Our struggles do not limit us. What matters is our ability to keep growing. The lotus also reminds us that growth happens step by step. It does not appear suddenly above the water. It takes time, pushing through layer after layer, even when it cannot yet see the sun. Often, we want quick results. We want to overcome difficulties immediately, to find happiness without delay. But true growth is a slow and steady process. The lotus does not rush, and neither should we. Every step forward, no matter how small, is part of our journey. Another lesson from the lotus is that beauty is not about perfection. When the flower blooms, it is not flawless. Its petals may have small imperfections, yet it is still beautiful. In our lives, we sometimes feel that we need to be perfect to be worthy. We compare ourselves to others, worrying that we are not good enough. But just like the lotus, our beauty comes from our uniqueness. We do not need to be perfect to have value. The lotus grows in water, yet it is not controlled by it. It does not let the currents push it in different directions. Instead, it stays grounded, floating steadily. This teaches us that while we live in a changing world, we do not have to be controlled by external circumstances. We can stay steady, true to ourselves, no matter what happens around us. The journey of the lotus is a reminder that we too are always growing. No matter our challenges, we have the strength to rise. No matter our past, we have the potential to bloom. And just like the lotus, our lives are filled with beauty, even in the midst of struggle. The lotus does not question its purpose. It does not wonder if it should grow or if it is worthy of blooming. It simply follows its natural path, rising from the mud and opening its petals when the time is right. Yet, as human beings, we often struggle with questions about ourselves. Who am I? What is my purpose? Am I on the right path? Self-discovery is a journey, much like the journey of the lotus. We begin in uncertainty, surrounded by the mud of doubts, fears, and expectations from others. Sometimes, we try to be what the world wants us to be, rather than who we truly are. But just as the lotus grows upward toward the light, we must seek our own truth. We do not have to stay in the darkness of uncertainty. We can rise. One lesson the lotus teaches us is that our true self is already within us. The flower does not become something new when it blooms. It simply reveals what was always there. In the same way, discovering ourselves is not about changing who we are. It is about uncovering the beauty that already exists inside us. We do not need to look outside for our worth. It is already present, waiting to be seen. The journey of self-discovery takes time. The lotus does not bloom in a single day, and we do not find all the answers at once. Sometimes we may feel lost, just as the flower must push through the water before it reaches the surface. But every experience, every challenge, and every moment of reflection brings us closer to understanding ourselves. Even when we feel uncertain, we are still growing. Another lesson from the lotus is that self-discovery requires trust. The flower does not see the sun when it begins its journey, yet it continues to rise, trusting that the light is there. In the same way, we may not always see the answers we seek, but that does not mean they do not exist. If we keep moving forward, we will eventually reach clarity. The lotus reminds us that our true self is something to embrace, not to fear. We do not need to be perfect. We do not need to have all the answers. We simply need to keep growing, keep rising, and allow ourselves to bloom in our own time. The beauty of the lotus is not just in its petals, it is in its journey. And so it is with us. The lotus does not resist change. It does not try to hold onto the mud where it was born, nor does it cling to the water as it rises. It simply grows, adapting to each stage of its journey. When the time comes, it opens its petals fully, embracing the sunlight. It does not fear transformation. It welcomes it. In life, change is constant. We move through different stages, facing new challenges, opportunities, and uncertainties. Yet, many of us struggle with change. We resist it, fearing the unknown. We hold on to the past, even when it no longer serves us. We hesitate to move forward, worried about what might come next. But the lotus teaches us that change is not something to fear. It is a natural and necessary part of life. Growth is impossible without change. If the lotus refused to leave the mud, it would never bloom. If it tried to stay beneath the water, it would never reach the sun. In the same way, if we hold on to what is familiar, we may miss the opportunity to grow into something greater. Letting go of the past does not mean forgetting it. It means accepting that we are always evolving. Sometimes, change comes slowly, like the gradual rise of the lotus. Other times, it happens suddenly, like a strong wind, shaking the water. Both kinds of change can be challenging. But just as the lotus does not fight against the currents, we do not need to fight against the changes in our lives. We can learn to move with them, trusting that each stage brings us closer to where we are meant to be. One of the greatest lessons from the lotus is that transformation is beautiful. When the flower finally blooms, it does not look back and regret the journey. It does not wish to return to the mud. It simply stands in the sunlight, fully embracing what it has become. We too can learn to embrace our own transformation. Instead of fearing what is ahead, we can trust that every step is part of our unfolding. Change is not always easy, but it is always possible. No matter where we are, we have the ability to rise, to adapt, and to bloom in our own time. The lotus reminds us that transformation is not something to resist. It is something to welcome. And when we do, we find that life itself is always moving toward the light. The lotus does not dwell in the past or worry about the future. It does not question how long it will bloom or regret the time it spent in the mud. It simply exists in the present, opening its petals fully to the sun. It does not rush its growth or try to change its surroundings. It accepts where it is and allows itself to be exactly as it is meant to be. In our own lives, it is easy to become lost in thoughts of the past or worries about the future. We replay old mistakes, holding on to regret, or we spend time planning, hoping, or fearing what is to come. But in doing so, we often miss what is happening right now. The lotus reminds us that the present moment is the only place where life truly happens. Many of us wait for a perfect time to be happy. We tell ourselves, I will be at peace when I achieve this goal, or I will feel complete when my situation improves. But the lotus does not wait for the right conditions to bloom. It blossoms wherever it is, no matter how deep the mud or how unpredictable the water. It teaches us that we do not need to wait to experience peace and joy. We can find them right here, in this moment. When we focus too much on the past, we carry unnecessary weight. When we are too concerned about the future, we create unnecessary stress. But when we allow ourselves to simply be, just as the lotus does, we find a deep sense of peace. We realize that we do not need to change the world around us to feel content. We only need to be present with what is. The lotus also teaches us that each stage of life is meaningful. It does not rush to bloom, nor does it resist when its petals eventually fall. Every moment of its journey has purpose. In the same way, we can learn to appreciate where we are right now, rather than always looking ahead. Whether we are struggling, growing, or thriving, each moment is part of our path. Life is happening now, in this very moment. The lotus does not waste time wishing to be somewhere else. It simply exists, fully alive in the present. And when we learn to do the same, we discover that the beauty we have been searching for has been here all along. The lotus does not need to prove its strength. It does not push against the water or struggle to be noticed. It simply rises, steady and unwavering, until it reaches the surface. Its strength is not loud or aggressive. It is quiet, gentle, yet unshakable. In life, we often think of strength as something forceful. We admire those who are bold, powerful, or unafraid to fight for what they want. But the Lotus teaches us that true strength does not come from force. It comes from patience, resilience, and the ability to endure without losing oneself. The Lotus faces many challenges in its journey. It begins in the mud, hidden in darkness. As it grows, it must push through layers of water, never knowing when it will finally reach the light. But it does not resist. It does not rush. It simply moves forward, trusting in its own path. This is the kind of strength that sustains us in difficult times. The ability to keep going, even when the way is unclear. There is power in gentleness. The lotus does not harden itself to survive. It remains soft, delicate, and open, yet it thrives. This reminds us that we do not need to become cold or unfeeling to protect ourselves. Strength does not mean shutting out emotions or avoiding vulnerability. Like the lotus, we can be strong and open at the same time. Another lesson from the lotus is that strength is not about being unaffected by the world. It is about rising above it. The flower does not ignore the mud from which it came, but it does not let the mud define it. In the same way, we do not have to be controlled by hardship, negativity, or the opinions of others. True strength is knowing who we are and staying true to ourselves, no matter what surrounds us. The world often tells us that we need to be louder, tougher, or more aggressive to succeed. But the lotus shows us another way. Strength is not about how much we can control, but about how much we can endure with grace. It is about standing firm, yet remaining soft. It is about growing, not by force, but by trust. The lotus blooms in its own time, in its own way, without struggle. And when we embrace this quiet strength in ourselves, we too can rise, steady, unshaken, and beautifully whole. The lotus does not seek to be more than it is. It does not try to change its color or compare itself to other flowers. It simply blooms in its own way, embracing its natural beauty. It does not chase after more petals or wish for a different shape. Its elegance comes from its simplicity. In life, we often complicate things. We fill our minds with unnecessary worries, we chase after things we do not truly need, and we measure our worth by external success. But the lotus reminds us that true wisdom lies in simplicity. When we let go of distractions, when we stop trying to be something we are not, we find clarity and peace. Simplicity does not mean lacking ambition. The lotus still grows, still blooms, still reaches for the light. But it does not add unnecessary weight to its journey. In the same way, we can grow and achieve without carrying unnecessary burdens. We do not need to compare ourselves to others, nor do we need to fill our lives with excess to feel complete. The lotus exists in harmony with its surroundings. It does not demand more than what is given. It does not fight against the water or struggle to control its environment. It simply adapts, trusting that what it has is enough. This teaches us an important lesson. Peace comes not from having more, but from appreciating what we already have. We often believe that happiness is found in the next achievement, the next possession, or the next stage of life. But the lotus does not wait for something external to make it whole. It blooms fully in the present moment, without longing for more. This reminds us that fulfillment does not come from adding more to our lives, but from appreciating what is already there. Simplicity allows us to see what truly matters. When we remove distractions, when we stop complicating our path, we realize that joy is found in the small moments, in the warmth of the sun, the movement of water, and the quiet beauty of being alive. Like the lotus, We do not need to chase after more to find meaning. We do not need to complicate our lives to feel complete. True wisdom is in knowing that, as we are, in this moment, we are enough. When we embrace simplicity, we find that everything we need has been within us all along. The lotus does not need instructions on how to grow. It does not hesitate, wondering if it is on the right path. It simply follows the natural rhythm of life, rising from the mud, moving through the water, and blooming when the time is right. In its journey, it teaches us how to live, not through words, but through its quiet example. Each stage of the lotus's life holds a lesson. The mud teaches us that difficulties are not barriers, but foundations for growth. The water reminds us that the journey may be long and uncertain, but every step forward matters. And the bloom shows us that no matter where we begin, we all have the potential to reach the light. One of the greatest lessons from the lotus is that we do not need to force our growth. It does not rush to bloom before it is ready. It does not compare itself to other flowers. It simply follows its own timing, trusting that when the moment comes, it will open fully. We too can learn to trust our own process. We do not need to be perfect right now. We do not need to have all the answers. Growth happens naturally when we allow ourselves to move forward without fear. The lotus also teaches us resilience. No matter how deep the mud, no matter how strong the water's current, it keeps rising. It does not give up. In life, we will face challenges, but we are stronger than we think. Even in the hardest times, we can keep moving forward. Even when we cannot see the sunlight yet, we can trust that it is there. Another lesson of the lotus is that we do not need to hold on to what no longer serves us. When its petals begin to fall, the flower does not try to keep them. It lets them go, knowing that new growth will come. In the same way, we can learn to release the past, letting go of old fears, regrets, and doubts. Only then can we make space for new beginnings. The lotus is a guide, not just in its beauty, but in its wisdom. It shows us that life is a journey, that every stage has meaning, and that no matter what challenges we face, we have the power to rise. If we follow its example, we will find that we too can bloom in our own way, in our own time, and in our own perfect completeness. The journey of the lotus is one of patience, resilience, and quiet beauty. From the moment it takes root in the mud to the day it blooms in the sunlight, it follows its natural path without resistance. It does not question its growth. It does not compare itself to other flowers. It simply rises, trusting in its own process. In many ways, we are like the lotus. We begin our lives surrounded by challenges, uncertainties, and moments of struggle. At times, the path ahead may feel unclear, just as the lotus cannot see the surface when it first begins to grow. But the lotus reminds us that we do not need to have all the answers right away. We only need to keep moving forward. Every stage of the journey is valuable. The mud provides the nutrients for the lotus to grow, just as our struggles help shape us into who we are. The water offers both resistance and support, reminding us that difficulties can also be opportunities for strength. And the bloom itself teaches us that beauty is not found in perfection, but in embracing our own unique journey. The lotus does not fear change. It does not cling to the past or resist the future. When the time comes, it lets go of its petals, knowing that this too is part of the cycle of life. In the same way, we can learn to accept change with grace. We can release what no longer serves us, trusting that new beginnings will come. Above all, the lotus teaches us that no matter where we come from, we have the ability to rise. We are not defined by our past, nor are we limited by our struggles. Just as the lotus reaches for the light, we too can move toward clarity, peace, and fulfillment. Thank you for spending this time reflecting on the wisdom of the lotus with me. Your support, whether through liking this video, subscribing to the channel, sharing your thoughts in the comments, or sending a super thanks, is truly appreciated. It means a lot to know that these reflections resonate with you. If these words have brought you even a moment of peace or inspiration, then this journey together has been meaningful. May your path, like the journey of the lotus, be filled with growth, light, and quiet strength. And may you always remember that, no matter where you are in your journey, you have the power to rise.